channel. Here, we objectively and openly discuss true crime cases and identify where societal norms have turned red flags into gray ones, or in some cases, have eradicated them altogether in the face of death. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. It's a great way to show some free support to the channel, and I greatly appreciate you being here. Let's dive right in. In this episode, I want to discuss with you a little more about the phone ping that occurred on the morning of August 13th, 2018 with regards to Kessinger. One theory could potentially be that after the 111-minute phone call, something didn't sit well with her. I mentioned this in a previous episode, so some of this may sound a little familiar. However, given the significance of both Chris and Kessinger completely having amnesia when it comes to that particular call and its contents, in my opinion, holds the key to why that phone ping matters so much that morning, and potentially even more. Something he said did not sit well with Kessinger. Imagine this: they are having a difference in opinion on that phone call on what's to happen next, or what are the next steps going to be for their relationship, or especially regarding Shanann and their marriage. She's on her way home, or whether or not the flight delay was relayed or not. But the point is Shanann's coming home, and now what's coming next for Kessinger and Chris. So he's telling her, don't worry, we've got this and everything is going to be all right. And then in the same sentence telling her about the flight delay for Shanann. I kind of feel like this is what happened. And again, this is my speculation of that 111-minute phone call, because of course we're told that neither one of them conveniently know anything or remember anything about that phone call. However, I do believe that he told Kessinger about the delay, and she didn't believe him. And that, to me, is what ultimately prompts her actions moving forward. In any affair, trust is already limited, given the committed person is already living a lie, as is the mistress with the lie in her head that what they're doing really isn't wrong. Trust is wavering with humongous ebbs and flows. Or worse, Chris tells Kessinger that Shanann is really making efforts to work on their marriage, and while he's been miserable, he feels he needs to focus on his family. It's my opinion that this is more likely what was said on that phone call. Any admission of this would give both of them motive to some degree, especially if Kessinger thought she was pregnant. You've got a woman who, in that moment, has completely fallen for this man. She likes to say in the interviews that she's not, but let's be real. She's been looking at wedding dresses for hours. She sees herself with him, and now if he drops her cold turkey, like a lot of married men will, they'll talk it up, and want everything from you. Then when shit hits the fan at home, they'll drop you like you're nothing, leaving you, the mistress, to handle all of the mixed emotions. I think it's quite evident in the police interviews that there is something that's festering within Kessinger, especially when it comes to Shanann. This makes me think of someone who is jealous because no matter how good she is, no matter how much she gives him that he claims he's not getting from his wife, no matter how, the simplest way to put it is no matter how good Kessinger is to him, he will always choose Shanann because of the girls and because that's his family. Which is what leads me to believe that he tried to end things during that phone call, and Kessinger chose to show up. Again, I mentioned it in a previous video. I know it's a little similar, but it is one of my leading opinions on what happened that morning, was that she showed up. The question is, when and how did she get inside? On page 63 of the discovery, we see a message noted on August 15th, 2018 from one of Shanann's friends, Cindy D is what I'm going to call her, stating that law enforcement should check the trash can because if there was a Pro Bar wrapper in there, then that would indicate that Shanann had been at home. Well, in the discovery photos, we see not one, but 2 Pro Bar wrappers and a half an order of Starbucks, meaning when you carefully examine the sticker on the Starbucks cup that's sitting in the garage, or in the garbage can, the time noted on the cup is difficult to see, but we can zoom in here and I'll post on the screen the time that I see. And in the doorbell footage, Shanann is not carrying, she's got her phone in one hand, she's got her suitcase in the other. We see no Starbucks cups, no trash in her hand or anything like that. Now, this doesn't mean that it couldn't have been in her purse. However, I wouldn't think that she would risk crumbs or coffee spilling out in her purse. And furthermore, I don't recall seeing any present in the photos of the purse from the evidence photos. So that, in my opinion, is a question for Chris. Who ate the Pro Bars? Who ate them that morning? And where did the Starbucks cup come from? Does this indicate to you that a friend may have stopped by that morning and brought the Starbucks? Or who was this person? Was it Nicole A. or was it Nicole K? My thoughts are that he tried to end things and she showed up early that morning. She knew he was supposed to be at work, and if he was at work, then she could have had a one-to-one conversation with Shanann. If Chris is telling the truth about introducing them earlier on in the year, then Shanann would have recognized her and potentially opened the back door, or worse, she may have even walked out to Chris and Kessinger in the garage. The quote, "she wasn't supposed to be there," made by Chris, makes a little more sense like this. Imagine you just return home in the wee hours of the morning. Your marriage is on the rocks, and you wake up to find another familiar face in the garage at dark 30 in the morning with your husband. How does this conversation go? When you comment below, please share what you think you would do if the situation occurred in your home. We can learn more by different perspectives and personal opinions than by simply regurgitating the case and personal opinions regarding Shanann and what we think she should have done. Like, tell me, in the event that this happened to you, how do you think you would have handled it? If the women were talking among themselves, then Chris would be laser focused on getting out of there that morning, especially because he knew that all hell was about to break loose. Maybe Kessinger approaches Shanann and says, "Hey, I've been sleeping with your husband for X amount of time. He's BSing us both. I'm out, but felt you should know. I'm sorry, and here's the coffee." Let's assume the best about Kessinger, because you don't just go into a jury trial saying, "Oh, I think she did it," and not having any evidence to back it up. So let's say she bought hook, line, and sinker that he was getting a divorce and that he was indeed separated, which is a problem in and of itself, but let's give the benefit of the doubt. She was under the impression he was done and moving out, then realizes he's not. And he's going to throw her down, pretending like nothing happened at all. Only she gets there and the house is empty. No lights are on, so then she drives around back. Still nothing. Did she go in through the basement? Who put the front door lock on that morning? When did it get put on? Was it Shanann, Kessinger, Atkinson? Many argue that if she showed up, we would see the doorbell footage. However, if part of her immunity was sealing the details of the bombshell evidence that Ruart claims she gave, then we would not be privy to this footage. The R's claim that they have more than we do and they no longer blame her. No matter how much they wanted to blame her, they know she had nothing to do with it. So something had to be revealed, or else the family is just sticking their heads in the mud and refusing to continue to fight, which I do not believe. They are fighting something. I'm just not quite sure exactly what or who they think they are fighting. Personally, it's my opinion that it's grief. That's neither here nor there for this video. The phone pinged essentially outside of the Watts house, and it has been confirmed in discovery that she pinged off of the same towers during her visits over the summer. Kessinger herself places herself there on these specific days that corroborate the earlier pings. That's more than a coincidence. My source in law enforcement that I refer back to has said repeatedly that no one in law enforcement believes in coincidences, and if they say they do, it's usually to cover up something. There is a reason for everything that happens, especially during a crime. I do cover this more in the Hidden Motive series, so be sure to check those out. But the bigger question to ask, in my opinion, is how did she enter the home? Now, law enforcement asked her this, and she mumbles all over the place before saying essentially all points of entry. This is the part where her father clearly gets annoyed with her as well. It's as if in that moment he realizes she is really trying to cover up even more than what she's told him. I mean, how simple is that question? If you claim you've only been somewhere 2 to 3 times at most, you know if you went through the front, back, basement, or garage. There's no guesswork. You should know the answer to that, and it should come fairly quickly. And she wasn't even trying to be cute about the fact that she claims she, kind of played around with the thought and couldn't give a straight answer. Call it what you want, but that morning, no call to Chris, which is completely different than weeks prior, and pinging off the same known tower is not a coincidence. It is merely speculation as to what actually happened that morning. But again, we are assuming she's innocent for the purpose of this video. Innocent, but still present that morning. In my opinion, that's why in this next clip we hear her father stating they needed to be quick to shut down the case so others didn't get confused about times, etc. It's my opinion that he was explaining that his concern was that the longer this went unsolved, then the more opportunity people had to question her presence on the timelines. I mean, we see how it is 5 years later when it comes to her whereabouts. Can you imagine immediately after the deaths? The media would have devoured her, and her father knew it. It would have been a harder sell, especially publicly.
Yeah, I'm with you. We definitely need to accelerate the case because the more it takes, the less sure that they are of situations. But on the other end, I think if you do just that only,
you tell me what you're willing to provide to me, and we'll write it.
Is that good enough?
I just want our text conversation and then I guess our phone call records.
So I'm going to put
So the time and date of the phone call records and then our text message.
Could we get photos of him?
Huh?
Could we get photos of him?
Off of
Would
that?
you mind if we got his
Something
photos?
as simple as she was just having another streak of jealousy and decided to drive by there, yet there were no lights on and no one was there, wouldn't really glaze over in the media quite as easily as it was to blame Chris for everything and give the mistress very minimal roles that morning. My guess is she showed up and parked, then realized that no one was home. She knew Shanann would be up with the girls and that there should be movement within the house. She didn't see any, and this caused her to be alarmed for some reason, potentially something that Chris said in that 111-minute phone call. But what is it? Why not give that bit of information? If something prompted her to show up that morning, why not share what it was that prompted her to just go? And in my opinion, in a panic, she reaches out to Jim because Jim is her confidant or her ride or die. And she'd rather reach out to him before her dad because no one wants to call their dad when they're the mistress in the situation and now the family is missing. And my guess is Jim either didn't answer or told her to get the hell out of there and call her dad. For her to have shown up that morning, even if she stayed in her truck, she very well could have sat outside and watched the whole thing happen that morning. The freak out mode in the delay before reaching out to law enforcement is, understandable to some degree. No doubt was due to her making sure that she was not going to incriminate herself. And I believe that's where we see that protective measure come out from her dad. She could have parked out front or out back and very well been a part of everything. She could have been an unknowing participant, because in many communities that we've discussed, one topic we have discussed openly are the ice chests found down in the basement. He could very easily have said or asked her to back up her truck to the fence so that he could load up the ice chest, quote unquote, for work, to see if she would drive them out to Survey. Keep in mind, if she never clocked in that morning. So we have no documentation of when she actually arrived to work that morning, because we also do not see the parking lot surveillance. We never had that released to us. And she very easily could have driven them out to Survey and dropped them off with Chris. The only question I would have after that would be potentially he called her to return to pick up the ice chest once they were emptied. And she did that, ultimately returning them back to the basement. She would have had time, because if it is something as simple as, hey, I just need to drop these ice chests off, then no one really is going to question that. The ice chests do come up again in the discovery and in the additional confession. Additionally, Kessinger tries to distance herself as far as she can from having any contact with the ice chest. She mentions this when she's talking about their camping trip. She very easily could have asked him questions, and he may have told her, don't ask me any questions. I really just need you to haul these out to Survey for me. I need to empty them, and then I'll have you bring them back, and, just leave it at that. Tell her it's something for the guys. Tell her, I don't know, it's chicken. It could have been a number of things in those ice chests. However, if the girls were in them, no one would ever see them. And if it was sealed, she would have never known. Keep in mind, she sold her truck very quickly after the plea deal. And it was, very well may have been prior to the plea deal. I can't quite remember that. But it didn't take her long to sell her beloved Toyota 4Runner. Keep in mind, she was pretty excited about her 4Runner, and she was part of, I believe, different SUV groups and things like that on Facebook. I do feel like I have to address that before anyone says, well, Kessinger was never on Facebook. She did have socials, and she likes to, again, distance herself from even social media, because I believe that was all a behavior that she had essentially taken on when she was trying to prove to Chris just how different she was than Shanann. It was, oh, I don't have to be on social media all the time, or I don't have to do, X, Y, and Z. But she did, in fact, have Facebook before, because her accounts had been deleted. And she was excited about her SUV, her Toyota 4Runner. She has pictures with her standing out next to it. It's it's something to be proud of when you're 30 and you have, your dream vehicle. But if in fact she, unbeknownst to her, hauled off the girls in these ice chests in her truck, not knowing what they were, and they had talked about broken refrigerators, temperatures, things like that. It very well could have just been hey, can you haul all this meat off to Survey so I can give it to Troy, or I can give it to somebody else and they're going to keep it for me, or whatever. There could have been 1,000,001 reasons for it. But then she finds out really truthfully what was in those ice chests, and it makes her sick. And anybody would want to get rid of their vehicle after that. That would be traumatizing. Keeping in mind, she has called Chris now for weeks. Same time, it's almost like clockwork. It's such a routine. And then conveniently, she does not call him this morning. This, in my opinion, is even more evidence of something was said in that 111-minute phone call, and she was trying to catch him in the act. She was trying to catch him either lying to her, that Shanann was indeed home and not going anywhere, that whether she wanted to confront Shanann, not even confront as in confrontation, but just letting Shanann know hey, this is what your husband's been doing, girl code kind of thing. However, that morning she shows up and she pings off of the same tower that she had pinged off of previously when she was at Saratoga. What do you make of this? Drop your responses in the comments below. It's quite the coincidence that the morning she took a different route. She did not call Chris, and yet she still pinged off the tower that morning that she pinged off of previously. Those are facts. It's a little known detail that it's a little known detail that she clearly trusts Jim as a friend. She mentions in her interviews with police and as well with her dad that, Jim has been a great friend for a very long time. Now, whether this is a friend that she's grown up with, grown around, it's like an old buddy of hers, maybe her dad and his dad are friends, just typical close family friend. Regardless, it's almost as if she called him because that was her immediate, her immediate reaction was to turn to him and ask for his advice, but then quickly realized I probably needed to call my dad. In my opinion, this is why the phone ping and what the whole phone ping was about was she panicked and she initially calls Jim, and that's why she insisted on leaving Jim alone. She was just saying, like, basically, this was an oh crap moment. I accidentally called Jim. Jim really has nothing to do with it. He doesn't really know what's going on. I don't want him brought into this. And I believe that because her father came into that interview, it solidified her story in that, look, yes, I called Jim. It was a mistake. I should have just called my dad, and that's what I did. I immediately hung up with Jim, called my dad, because I knew something was wrong. So I've mentioned before, Jim is either someone that she either never wants to cross, or he's just genuinely been such a good friend that he knows all of her personal secrets. And if, in fact, he were ever interviewed by police, she would have no control over what actually would have been said. So regardless, the kicker for me is simply, what the hell is that call all about? Do you think it's as simple and innocent as she was scared that morning, and so she reached out to her friend that she knew was coming into town or was in town, and she's just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And she calls him. Or do you think there was a bigger reason for why she called him? For the sake of her innocence in this video, she could have just as easily have been the 30-year-old woman who was driving by that morning, checking up on a man that she had been sleeping with, and when she got there, she was spooked. She knew immediately something was off, so her immediate reaction was to call Jim. She panics, and Jim says, what the hell, like, get the fuck out of there, and hang up the phone. So then she hangs up the phone, and she doesn't connect again until later in the day. Now, previously, leading up to this day, we see a lot of back and forth between her dad, Jim, and Chris, and it just kind of ping-pongs back and forth. But then there's something about it that makes her feel like she needs to talk to someone with a little more authority, meaning her dad. And I don't mean authority as in, like, he has friends in high places. I simply mean, like, you go to your friends and have conversations with them, or you go to your friends when you're in a bind, or you really feel like you're getting into trouble. But then when you really feel like you're in over your head, you reach out to the people who love you unconditionally, and that's typically your parents. So in conclusion, if this were presented to you as a jury to explain why in fact did she ping outside the residence that morning, would you be able to accept this as a reasonable form of doubt to secure her innocence? Remember, you must let go of all perceived notions and only consider what's allowed into evidence. If she were on the stand and this were her explanation to you as to why she pinged that morning, or why she didn't clock into work, or why she sold her truck, would you, as a juror, would you be able to consider it reasonable or unreasonable? Drop in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.